Good day everyone. Today we will tackle about a world of ideas, the global media cultures. For this day, we will tackle about the four internet learning outcomes. First, understand how scholars have approached the relationship between media and globalization. Next, differentiate the paradigms that develop in international communications development. Third, explain the strengths and weaknesses of these paradigms, which led to its loss of appeal. Lastly, equip you, students, with 21st century learning and develop higher order of thinking skills that will lead towards a deeper understanding of global media cultures as well correlate the said concepts to the Philippines in general and to oneself in particular. But first, let us have what culture is and how do culture affects the globalization and how media affects the society. So, globalization entails the spread of various cultures. So, when a film is made in Hollywood, it is shown not only in the United States, right? But also in other cities across the globe. For example, the South Korean rapper Psy his song about the Gangnam Style, it have been about a wealthy suburb in Seoul, but its listeners include millions who have never been or may never go to Gangnam. Well, some of them may not even know what Gangnam is. So that's globalization. Globalization also involves the spread of ideas. It's a formation of value. It's evolved due to globalization. So that's media how it affects the globalization. For example, the nation of the rights of the lesbians, the gays, the bisexuals, and the transgenders, or the LGBTQ plus communities is spreading across the world and becoming more widely accepted. Okay, so that's how media really affects globalization. It also affects the culture, a major role in spread of culture and ideas. Globalization relies on media as its main conduit for the spread of global culture and ideas. So there are really an inmate relationships between globalization and media, which must be unraveled to further understand the contemporary world. Global media culture, free flow of information, the road to modernization. How do global media affects globalization? Particularly, we are focusing on economic side, like in market integration, the global market. Also, we have free flow of information like the models of development through mass media and free flow of information through modernization of paradigm. So we also have mass media which plays a critical role in modernization paradigm. For example, we have the more internationalized like the news organizations. We can see we have the CNN. It can be seen in the Philippines. And yet, it can be seen in different countries, right? We also have positive association between communication components to that of the social, political, and economic components in national growth. how do we associate media? Media, it is more difficult to determine what media do and how they affect society. There are many kinds of media that really affects society. So it can be a form of technology that reshapes societies, the television, all right? So the television has also drawn people away from other meaningful activities such as playing games or reading books. So today, the smartphone allows the users to keep in touch instantly with multiple people at the same time. So we also have to consider the effects of the internet on relationships. Prior to cell phone, there was no way for couples to keep constantly in touch or to be updated on what the other does all the time. Really, the technology is the medium and not the message makes for the social change possible. Like in the cell phone, they expand people's senses because they provide the capability to talk to more people instantaneously and simultaneously. On the other hand, they also limit the senses because they make users easily distractible and more prone to multitasking. So this is not necessarily a bad thing, ha, students, but it is merely the change with a trade-off. The question now is what new media enhance and what they amputate was not a moral or ethical one. Like the new media are neither inherently good nor bad. Let us discuss about the global media culture. Developing societies must follow the Western concept of modernity in order to achieve development. We have to treat mass media as a factor that intervenes between antecedents and consequences of modernization. We also have criticisms which also laid down against these theories that the government espousing this Western model of modernization, which used the media system to control over the population rather than promoting education for democracy. Such criticisms, which mark the shift to the cultural imperialism paradigm. So there are really the analysis of technology which examines the impact of electronic media. For example, McLuhan, he was writing around 1960s. He mainly analyzed the social changes brought about by television. So he declared that television was turning the world into a global village. Not everyone experienced or had television. By this, he meant that as more as the people sat down in front of their television sets and listened to the same stories, their perception of the world would contract. So if tribal villages once sat in front of fires to listen to collective stories, the members of the new global village would sit in front of bright boxes in their living rooms. And in the years after McLuhan, the media scholars furtherly grappled with the challenges of a global media culture. A lot of these early thinkers assumed that global media has a tendency to homogenize culture. So they want one culture. They argued that as a global media spread, people from all over the world would begin to watch, to listen, to read the same things. So these thinkings arose at the same time when the Americans' power had turned it into the world's cultural heavyweight. Commentators therefore believe that the media globalization coupled with American hegemony would create a form of cultural imperialism whereby its American values and culture would overwhelm all others. It was the 1976 when media critic Herbert Schiller argued that not only was the world being Americanized, but that his process also led to the world of American capitalist values like consumerism. Similarly, for John Tomlinson, the cultural globalization is simply an for Western cultural imperialism. So they promote homogenized, westernized customer culture. Those scholars, McLuhan and others, they decry cultural imperialism. However, they have a top-down view of the media since they were more concerned with the broad structures that determine media content. But their focus mainly on America has led them to neglect other global flows of information that the media can enable. So, for example, the media and the cultural imperialism theory has therefore the subject to their significant critic. So that demanding for the balanced flow and information wherein the cultural imperialism paradigm grew in influence. They not align countries' declaration of 1979, also known as the Havana Declaration, which against an even flow of information. So the slight differences between cultural imperialism and media imperialism because they wanted to be one. They wanted to have a culture as one. So the cultural domination they pave the way for the entry of the Western based transnational corporation that would dominate non-Western economies. So in our time, it was from 2014 when we have the world's largest media company. We have now the Google, the Walt Disney, Comcast, 21st Century Fox, Facebook, Bertelsmann, Viacom, CBS, Baidu, and News Corporation. So there are largest media company as of now. We also have known McDonald's. We have Hello Kitty. So there are different kinds of media company. How about the effects of Korean culture to the Filipinos, right? We have the K-pop, the K-drama. So there are really a challenge of audience studies in terms of cultural imperialism. So it's about the renewed strengths of regional trends in the globalization process. For example, we have the Asian culture, the worldwide globalization of media, the Japanese brands, like what I said, the Hello Kitty. From Hello Kitty to the Mario Brothers to Pokemon, they are now in indelible part of the global popular culture. Also, we can say that the Korean culture, the Korean media affects the Filipinos. We have the Korean pop, the K-pop, and the Korean novellas. Korean telenovelas or Korean dramas, it's K-dramas, which are widely successfully regionally and globally affects, right? Not only with this, we can even apply to culinary taste. The most obvious case of globalized Asian cuisine is sushi. So, while it is true that McDonald's has continued to spread across the nations, across the states, across Asia, it is also the case that the Asian brands have provided stiff competitions. Like the Philippines, we have the Jollibee, which claims to be the number one choice for fast food in Brunei. Okay, now let's see the annual global ranking of the largest media companies in the world. So as we all know, we have the television, which is the most important advertising medium. We also have the internet, which replaced print media as the second, and we have the print media, which goes down to the third. So contribution of media imperialism, scholars, they demand change in the UNESCO's communication policies. It's based on the NWICO debate. It's a report of the McBride Commission, which aims to promote independence, diversity, pluralism of media, and to strengthen the national media of the South. Okay, a while ago we discussed about the cultural pluralism and imperialism. Now, when we say it's the transition from homogenization to heterogenization, when we say cultural pluralism, it the results of the criticisms against cultural imperialism, which also known as the cultural globalization. It is the transition from one way to multi-directional flows. The heterogenization is anchored on the meaning of globalization as hybridization, synchronization, rhetori- rhetorito- re-territorialization, and indigenization. So it is systematically marginalizing the role of the state, like think global, act local, globalization ideas. We have the power which provides the audience without taking into account the inequality of their access to media and communications. Neglect of the economic clout of global media firms and concentration of the United States. Also, it is not the reflective of the assumptions of the paradigm. So this lesson about a world of ideas, the global media cultures, show that different media have diverse effects on globalization process. At one point, it seemed that the global television was creating a global monoculture. So now it seems more likely that social media will splinter cultures and ideas into bubbles of people who do not interact. Like societies can never be completely prepared for the rapid changes in the systems of communication. That every technological change, after all, creates multiple unintended consequences. Like consumers and users of media will have a hard time turning back the clock. Though people may individually try to keep out of Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, for example, that these medias will continue to engender social changes. So instead of fearing these changes or entering a state of moral panic, everyone must collectively discover ways of dealing with them responsibly and ethically.